Hey guys, Adiana Ortiz here with you today, where I'll be talking about Atari, its history, and its legacy. Hopefully many of you are already aware of the company that heavily influenced the 80s, but if not, don't worry, because I will fill you in. It all began on June 27, 1972, when Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney founded the legendary game company Atari Incorporations. 5 months later, on November 29th, Pong was released, and only 12 production units were built at this time. What in the world is Pong? Well, my friends, Pong is one of the earliest digital arcade games, and the very first sports game, for it was a two-dimensional take on table tennis. The game was simple, and the goal was to score 11 points against your opponent, who was either a computer or human, by controlling a paddle to hit a ball back and forth. A point was gained whenever your opponent failed to return the ball, and the ball only got faster the longer the game went on. Because Pong did so well in bars, arcades, and other public spaces, Atari decided to create a home version of the game, which would be called Home Pong. They originally reached out to toy and electronic retailers, but upon multiple rejections, decided to contact Sears Sporting Goods department. A deal was then made between the two, where Atari was to manufacture 150,000 units for Sears. And surprisingly, Atari succeeded. Yes! Atari now wanted to move on to bigger and better things. So, in late '75, Bushnell had a vision for an Atari VCS, Visual Computer System. He wanted to produce a flexible console that could play all 4 of Atari's then current games. With newly released MOS technology 6502, Atari's team was able to cheaply, yet efficiently, create the Atari 2600. This product was sure to be a hit everywhere, but Bushnell knew that it was too expensive for him to put on the market by himself. So what did he do? He killed Atari, figuratively speaking. In '76, Bushnell sold Atari Corporations to Warner Communications, and many mark this sell as the first death of Atari. Atari, now a subsidiary of Warner Communications, released the Atari 2600 in October of 1977. The 2600 shipped with 2 joysticks, now iconic for video games, and it was compatible with a keyboard and paddle controllers. At the time of release, it cost about $200, which is equivalent to $800 now. $800 now. Because of its high price, it took a few years for the 2600 to actually become popular among the American public. It also took Americans a while to realize that they could now play other games at home, not just Pong. It wasn't until the early 80s that the 2600 actually took off, largely thanks to the home conversion of arcade-famous Space Invaders. In the early 1980s, the home computer revolution was taking off, with products such as the Apple II. Atari wanted to adapt to this trend, so they released the Atari 400 and 800. These machines weren't the best on the market, but they were still pretty successful. By 1982, Atari's revenue was 70% of Warner Communications' income. This was great, but under the new leadership of Ray Kassar, Atari designers lost motivation, and they didn't have as much creative freedom as they wanted. This led to a string of unsuccessful games and consoles. The first failure was the Atari 5200. It failed because the controllers were unreliable, and there weren't many games available for it, and it wasn't compatible with the 2600 classic games. Another failure was that Atari's 3 divisions, home computing, game consoles, and arcades, were never cooperated, and they all worked on their own. This led to so many issues among the 3. The biggest failure was when Atari quickly released E.T. the Extraterrestrial. The game was made in just a matter of weeks, and it was rushed so it could be released on Christmas Day. Many Atari fans say it was terrible and utterly disappointing. Things only got worse from there when the video game crash of 1983 occurred. Atari and other American game companies were losing money. A lot of it. The extreme loss of money caused Warner to sell part of Atari in 1984. Warner kept the arcade division, known as Atari Games, and Jack Tramiel had bought the home computing and game console divisions, which became known as Atari Corporation. Atari Corp quickly got to work and released both the Atari XT and ST in 1985. Many major American electronic outlets didn't want to carry the computers, so a majority of them were sold in Europe. In 1989, Atari released the Lynx, a handheld console with colored graphics and sound. This product probably would have been really successful if it didn't have to compete with Nintendo's Game Boy, which, although it didn't have color, it was cheaper and the battery lasted longer. It was also a lot more available to the public. Atari was losing so much business to Nintendo that they even tried suing them, claiming that Nintendo had an illegal monopoly. Of course they failed, but they tried. In 1993, Atari released its last home console, the Jaguar. It was the only 64-bit interactive media entertainment system available at the time. But because Atari had disappointed the public so much at this point, no one wanted to buy it. Jack Tramiel didn't like where Atari Corp was going, and no one else did either. This caused a rapid succession of change of ownership of Atari corporations. Atari basically disappeared from public eye until 1999, when Infogames Entertainment bought all Atari assets. In the 2000s, Atari published games for every genre and console available at the time. In 2009, Infogames officially changed their name to Atari, essentially reuniting all Atari divisions under one Atari company. Since then, Atari has continued releasing games across all gaming platforms, but I would say Atari is most prevalent now in mobile gaming. In 2011, Atari Greatest Hits became #1 on the App Store, and they launched Atari Arcade just in time for the holidays. By 2012, Atari apps had over 10 million downloads across smartphones and tablets. Essentially, Atari defined the gaming industry. Think about it. You wouldn't have one of these, or one of these, if it weren't for one of these. Atari also highly influenced the 80s. I mean, both my parents had the Atari 2600 as their first console, and while making this video, they would not stop telling me how much they loved Atari when they were younger and how much it influenced them. The bright and eccentric styles of the 80s can definitely be seen from Atari games, and a lot of 80s music was sampled from Atari games. Artists such as Sugar Hill, the Chili Kids, the Lost Boys, and the Fresh Prince all had songs sampled from Atari. In short, Atari may not be the same revolutionary, legendary company it once was, but its influence still lingers. IGN even named the Atari 2600 as the second greatest console of all time, and Atari has over 400 games for every platform. Alright guys, that's the end. I hope you learned something new, and thanks for watching. For more information on Atari, you can go to Atari.com, where you'll also find a plethora of free online classic games, retail games forums, and the latest Atari news. Alright.